Welcome on a Monday night to Generation Movie. My name is J.W. Colwell, and you better bury Ned right. I'm joined, as always, by my partner in crime. You're just a writer. I'm just a writer. I don't even own a firearm.
No.
I want to welcome everybody to Generation Movie on a Monday night. We're, of course, knee deep in our Oscar decade cavalcade as we careen towards the Oscars. First thing I do want to mention, just because I've been getting yelled at for it, so I'm sick of getting yelled at. If you like our YouTube channel, if you like the show, if you like watching the show, if you like listening to Rich and I drone on about movies, which clearly Rich and I do, we like droning on about movies, by all means, like and subscribe and find us on YouTube channel. Almost all of our episodes are there to be screened again and again and again. We also, of course, have a Facebook page, on the Indie Escape Network Facebook page. A lot of good things go up on the page. A lot of interesting things go up on the page, as well as all of the episodes of the shows. We have a big show coming up with Wendy Zier this coming up this week. I also want to take the time out to say, Wendy, I'm sorry for her loss. I know Wendy. Wendy and the Zier family are dealing with the loss of her father. So I want to send my condolences out to another host on the network. And
of course, my condolences as well. If you need to talk to anybody,
we're the kings of losing parents at this point. Like
we talk a lot, but we also can listen.
We also listen very well. But I want to send a shout out to her. Just know that we're thinking of her and her family, and then in a very trying time. Losing a patriarch, losing a matriarch is a rough road to hoe. But Rich and I are always willing to listen. But she has a big show coming up this Thursday. I still think it's happening, so I'm hopefully, everything goes as planned, because I know it's like losing a loved one is a terrible thing. So I'm thinking of you, Wendy. I'm thinking about the show. I'm thinking about everybody involved with you and your family, and sending that along. But to other things, again, there's no easy way to kind of segue out of talking about condolences to a fellow co-host. But we are knee deep in this little pesky thing that you and I like to do every year, called the Oscars Decade Cavalcade, which means, Rich, we are careening head first towards the 96th Academy Awards. It's like 2 weeks away, like 2 or 3 weeks away at this point. But we've had a big weekend of Guild wins and losses, and that starts with the Screen Actors Guild, which of course the Academy is the largest voting member block is the actors, and then all the other guilds vote for Best Picture as well. Producers Guild also went off this week. Is there any way to stop the Oppenheimer train, Rich Drees?
I guess not. It seems that way right now. That it is the juggernaut to beat, and everybody else is running.
It's got 13 nominations, so it could lose 1 or 2 or 3 and still end up with double-digit Oscars, which is that is because there are Poor Things is immaculately conceived, looks amazing. The costume design is off the charts. The art direction is off the charts. Production design is off the charts. So, I could see it Oppenheimer losing a couple of technical awards here and there. But Cillian Murphy looks after the SAG Awards looks to be a lock. Robert Downey Jr. looks to be a lock. We're waiting on the Directors Guild. That hasn't gone off yet, but the Producers Guild went off this weekend as well, and that went to Oppenheimer. So pictures looking more and more like a lock. And then, the other big news out of the SAG this weekend was the most competitive category this year to me, in watching all of the things that happened at the SAGs, is Best Actress. Best Actress is a minefield of just because it could be a really bad night for someone. It's going to be a bad night for someone. But like I was telling you, I think we talked about it with Natasha last week. I am getting more and more signs in my world that there is a thought process that appears to be happening as Lily Gladstone won the SAG. Even Emma Stone was clapping triumphantly. And so
it wasn't a polite, "Oh, I'm so happy I can't show that I'm pissed off."
Thank God I didn't win. It was a thank God I didn't fucking win. Right? Yes. It was like, thank God it's not me, because I don't want to be the person to take the award away from her.
Yeah, she was super stoked about the whole thing. And, that's one thing I noticed. Now, I did want to kind of talk real quickly about, SAG was on Netflix, no commercials, bam, bam, bam. They got through the whole thing in about 2 hours and 15 minutes from the beginning of the actual.
You think this is a trend? You think this is about to become a trend?
I wasn't going to hit on that first. I was going to get to that. But I had one big complaint about the whole show. During their pre-show, it ran from 7 to 8, where they did a lot of red carpet interviews and stuff like that. They randomly just cut to 2 of their hosts who awarded the Stunt Ensemble and a Motion Picture Awards. And I was like, wait a minute. Why are we doing this in the middle of the freaking red carpet arrivals? The stunt people should be part of the main show itself. And I'm not saying that just because I know a few stunt people. And, this is something I felt for a long while.
Yeah, this is something you and I have talked about for a while, that this is a worthy category that needs to be added to the Academy Awards. Mm-hmm. It's a worthy category that should be part of the show. It shouldn't be part of the technicals or the weird scientific, arts awards they give early, or the governor's ball. I had other problems with the host. So here's the thing. One of the things that Netflix has not gotten used to yet is the hosts, right? So I watched, I was doing something, I got roped into kind of a family committal thing that I had to get done. And then I started watching, and to my abject horror, as I was watching Devine Randolph from The Holdovers, they were interviewing her backstage, and I don't know who the person was. I don't want to know who the person was.
He was not good.
He was terrible, and in the most insulting thing I've ever seen in my life, announces to a winner of a SAG award, upon congratulating her, you know what? I really enjoyed your movie as I watched it on a transcontinental, a flight across the country. Ugh. And I thought to myself, I want to hit this person. I want to hit this person so hard for, 1, insulting her, and 2, insulting the movie business. So I think you're right that it could be headed towards streaming, because Netflix is picking up a lot of live stuff. They just picked up Raw. They picked up, WWE Raw. They picked up a bunch of things.
Because of, naturally shrinking television audiences and
niche. It's become niche.
It's becoming more niche, unfortunately.
Although this year, again, I always say that when you get into an Oscar situation, as long as you have a host and you have 2 movies that have galvanized films the way Barbie and Oppenheimer have, and now we get an announcement today that Ryan Gosling will be singing I'm Just Ken at the Academy Awards. So there is... Yes, that's going to get some looks. So I always view it like, when you look at an Academy Award night, if you have big guns going on the Academy Award night, movies that people really have seen and do love. Like, you and I both love The Shape of Water, but it's not Oppenheimer, and it's not Barbie, and it's not even Poor Things. So, it's one of those things.
It feels like there's not much of a horse race between Barbie and Oppenheimer, though, which would be the thing that would really pull people in.
It would galvanize it. It would galvanize the idea that you had Barbenheimer as a cinematic event in July, and then you had Barbenheimer squaring off in March at the Oscars would be the kind of thing that Americans can sink their teeth into. But my only problem with this, sending it to Netflix or something, again, if we're not putting any money into these shows, we're just acquiring them and putting them on a network and being live. We had Idris Elba, who seemed bored to be there. We had, and the people behind that were doing the interviews were so goddamn bad that I was so angry, Rich. I think I texted you and was just like, this guy just said he watched the holdovers on a flight to somebody who won a SAG for the holdovers.
Why don't you just say, hey, I watched a theatrical camcorder recording of your movie on my freaking phone while you're at it.
Well, I watched the holdovers and your performance while I was getting kicked in the seat by a septuagenarian and an 8-year-old. I almost paid attention to your movie. And so that's where like, if you're going to get these live shows, and that's where we're headed. You know, Peacock had Golden Globes. They reacquired, or CBS had the Golden Globes. You're going to have to put some money into the red carpet and the behind the scene. Like, you need it to look as good as like ABC has done with the Oscars. Right?
Yes.
Starting at 6, everybody's showing up. They get the red carpet. They have all these people, going from, hey, who are you wearing? You're going to have to get it down before we get a fully transcribed thing. But it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either, Rich. Like, the guy backstage was so bad that it was just, it was, and it looked like he had a thing all to himself too. Like,
there were a couple
he was getting the winners as they were coming through.
Yeah. There were a couple of fun wins. Pedro Pascal, I thought, was hilarious because, as he says, he might have been a little drunk. But just his infection and everything, infectious energy, I think kind of did some good things for that. There was
also something you and I both hit upon. Jeff Goldblum in full weirdo mode, like full weirdo. And Gina Davis not really appreciating her ex-husband's full weirdo mode as she was happy to be there.
There are two types of people in the world. One who said, oh, Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, a Fly reunion. And the other are the ones who said, oh, Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, a Transylvania 65000 reunion.
Or an Earth Girls Are Easy reunion. Or boom. But the interesting thing about it was, again, it was the conflicting sides. Jeff Goldblum, who has never gone out of the spotlight, right? Mm-hmm. Does ads, is in Jurassic World movies, round the clock. And Gina Davis, who's kind of fallen away, right? And literally looked like, I am just happy to be here. Try not to fuck this up for me. That's how it looked to me. Like, it looked like Jeff Goldblum being weirdo Jeff Goldblum that everybody loves and also can handle for about a minute and a half. And he's given the ensemble where he's given Best Picture away. So it was a weird thing. Let's go to some comments. Also, again, if you like this kind of talk, like and subscribe to Facebook and YouTube, just to keep that going. Joe Ridgely, good evening, gentlemen. Hope all is well. I'm feeling better. I look better. I have a haircut. I have a shave. Good evening, friends. Good evening, Ken. Good to have you.
Always nice to see you,
feeling
Ken.
Good. Hey, brothers. Hey, Sean. My condolences. Yeah, the condolences go out to Wendy and her family. Absolutely. And then Pedro Pascal is a funny guy. Pedro Pascal might be. He's sinking his teeth into a lot of franchises, my friend. He's Star Wars, Last of Us. Now he's gonna be Mr. Fantastic. One Reed Richards.
I saw in an interview with Eben Crumbs. I can't remember his full name now. The guy from the Bear.
From the Bear.
Yeah. He said that the 4 Fantastic Four cast members already have a group chat going that Pedro Pascal started. And that seemed so right to me. I was like, of course he's going to be the one to start the group chat with everyone.
Yes, he's Reed Richards. He should be starting the goddamn group chat. And it should be on a Richards chat room. Something from the Baxter building. Anyway, Rich, I look up and I also see on your your fine shelves behind you, something I covet, but I no longer covet.
Yep.
Because here's the rub, kids. If you have one of these popcorn tubs, which, by the way, people were losing their fucking minds on Sunday night when I went to see Dune 2 to get these popcorn cups. And they must have sold 300 of them. Everybody in the theater I was in had one or was walking them out to their car for safekeeping.
How much did you pay for yours? Because you said your popcorn's containers
it ended up being like 27.
Okay, I was 25, and that came with a tub of popcorn as well.
Yeah, mine came with a tub of popcorn, but how could you possibly ruin this tin with popcorn? And I gotta tell you, folks, there is no justice to how soft these bristles are and how many people are going to be banging these online in a few days. I can't even... I can't... I don't know if it's going to be OnlyFans like you had said in the chat earlier, or I just think it's going to be people on TikTok having sex with them.
Even before the movie, we're still a week out.
I think there's a weird... This is a weird Barbenheimer thing. This has a Barbenheimer effect. The idea that this popcorn tub dropped and is now one of the most coveted things. It is going right on my popcorn. Like I find that my new thing is collecting popcorn tubs. It's one of my weird, like, I have the Dungeons and Dragons. I have the Dungeons and Dragons tub. I have the Batman head tub. Like, and I feel this is going to go right next to it. These are just finely crafted, really cool, made in China, hand wash only popcorn tubs. And I'm going to put it to the side because
brought these out right before Valentine's Day, they would have sold a lot more.
Oh, it just gets creepier and creepier. I can't. We're not going to talk about Dune tonight. Rich and I both have seen it. We could talk about Dune tonight. We could talk about what is the first great movie of 2024. It's the first actual movie where there are going to be people in a theater, and then the next showing is going to have people in the theater, and then the showing after that is going to have people in the theater.
It's the first 2024 movie I've given 4.5 stars to on Letterboxd.
It's pretty great. Timothée Chalamet, for all those people who are like, I don't get the Chalamet, you will. You'll get it. You'll understand. You'll also, like, the Chalamet thing is great. This is the kind of shot you get, by the way. This is a shot. This isn't like a simulated shot from the movie. This is an actual shot from the movie, which is ridiculous. You also have really good chemistry between Chalamet and Zendaya, so Tom Holland should be very careful. And then also,
spoiler about my feelings on the movie. My review, which I think clocks in around 700 to 800 words, is already up at FilmBuffOnline.com.
Perfect place to get it.
The Philadelphia Film Scribes podcast coming out later this week is almost an entire hour devoted to that movie with me and 3 other members of the group.
We're going to give very little spoilers, but we are going to do, Rich and I are going to do a review on Friday.
Yep.
As the movie opens proper, although it is opening on Thursday. By the way, Austin Butler doesn't sound like Elvis in this movie, just so we're clear. It is spectacle. It's probably, I'm going to throw out the name the movies I'm thinking of. The franchise has a lot in common with Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy. It has a lot in common with a singular director's vision, molding and shaping a not unfilmable, but hard to film and adapt, right? In a proper way. That's what Villeneuve is doing here. And it's the closest I think we've gotten. So I don't know, like, here's the interesting thing. It's 2024. There's nothing contending for Oscars right now. And this movie is epic. It's big and it's loud and it's beautiful and expertly shot. It's well done. The special effects are incredible. Sandworms are the ride. You're going to see fucking license plates that say, "My other ride is a sandworm." Like it's that kind of like zeitgeist that we're going into with this movie.
Kind of giving a quick glance over, some of the stuff that's coming in 2024 down the road a bit. I don't see anything that's going to be kind of like big and still, Academy Award.
Right, we're gonna get things like American Fiction or movies that land in November. Poor Things, right? That kind of like come in and get Oscar play. But this is one of those movies that's epic. It's large in scope. It should be up for every technical award at next year's Academy Awards. So a couple things. If Pirates of the Caribbean breaks down, the pirates don't eat the tourists. But Jeff Goldblum does eat all the scenery. So that's the weird rub on that one. It's going to be a ton of TikToks where they slam a credit card on the desk. Yeah, yeah. Do you know there's a Doom movie that was done in the 80s? Yes, I did. And
I saw it in the theater. I still have that little definition sheet that they handed out to people going in.
I did see that movie, and it's really not great. And it's but it was cut to ribbons, so like we have to do something there about that. Like that movie was cut to ribbons, so I'm joking, of course. Yes, yes, but we'll take those jokes. But no joking tonight. When we come to the movie we're talking about, of course. Oh, wait, one other thing. I do want to say this. I'm going to add a weekly segment to our Generation Movie thing, and that's fuck David Zaslav. I'm going to say it every week. I read an article, and here's the thing. I know people are fighting with me on Facebook and various places that I'm being too hard on David Zaslav, but we're not. We're not being too hard on David Zaslav. And I don't care. A couple things. I've been told, well, how can Margot Robbie, Tom Cruise, A24, and all these different things make deals with Warner Brothers? Those are easy to make deals, right? Margot Robbie putting her production shingle somewhere where she's more important than David Zaslav is true. Tom Cruise putting his production shingle somewhere where he's more important.
I dare say, too, that they've been trying to make Warner's look a lot more profitable, and I have a half a hunch that they're looking to spin the studio back off. Yeah, sell it off. And if you say, well, our studio has all of these amazing stars with production deals with us, that makes that look a lot more attractive. I also
don't care about the movies that are coming out this year that happen to be coming out from Warner Brothers. He's not responsible for Beetlejuice. He's not responsible for Dune. He's not responsible for any of these things that are going to come out that we want to see. What he is responsible for is taking a movie like Coyote versus Acme, which got great tests. So here's the thing. I'm going to say this to people for one last time. The Batgirl test screenings were awful, and they needed to do a lot of reshoots. Great. But the Coyote versus Acme test screenings were not awful. As a matter of fact, people thought it was one of the greatest fucking things they've ever seen. Also, test screenings on Salem's Lot, which is all of a sudden disappeared off the face of the earth. So much so that Stephen King had to bring it up. Okay? These are problems. And the thing is, during this last week's earning call, he made no mention of what's going to happen to Coyote versus Acme, which leads people to believe it's going to get written off as a tax thing. He also made no mention of the fact that people had offered money for it, even though knowing he could only get a certain amount of money for the tax write-off. So he is definitely a bad person with regards to the film business. He's a widget maker, as you used to say, right?
Yeah.
He makes widgets.
What's frustrating is that their tax write-off is like $30 million.
And people offered $50 million for it.
$40 million. So if I were a Warner's Discovery tax or shareholder, if I owned stock in that company, and I saw an executive turning down a $10 million profit in favor of just deleting something.
Just the idea, if you own Warner Brothers stock, cases are you grew up watching Looney Tunes, or you grew up watching some of these things that we're talking about. And yes, Zaslav has made really great decisions with regards to James Gunn and Peter Safran. Fine. But what I'm saying to you is these were easy decisions. These were not hard decisions to have A24 come in and get released by Warner Brothers, or have Margot Robbie come in. He is not good. He's a bad person with regards to, and he's dealing with one of my favorite film studios of all time.
Yeah.
I grew up on Warner Brothers stuff. So if you could kindly stop fucking around with things, that would be great. And I'm not defending the Snyder. Like somebody said, I must love the Snyderverse if I'm railing against Zaslav, that is a personal affront to every part of my being.
I'm not sure how you would make that leap of logic from point A of saying
anything,
David
and if you've seen or talked to me or ever watched anything that I've ever talked about in any way, I hate Zack Snyder and his Snyderites. So it has nothing to do with that. And the other thing is, during the conference call, and I will say this is the last thing I'm going to say about Zaslav, and we're going to talk about a really great Warner Brothers movie in a moment, or at least a good Warner Brothers movie. In the conference call, he mentioned a tax write-off of $75 million. That means, Rich, if you can do the math for me, the $30 million of Coyote versus Acme is part of that $75 million.
There's still another $85 million there.
$45 million. It's $45 million. We're not great at math. We love movies. It's $45 million, but there's a $45 million movie out there. We don't know what he's taking the write-off on.
If it was $115 million minus 30 that he's getting.
Oh, no. It was 75. It was 75.
85. 8, 9, 10, 11, and 5.
Whatever it is. He's got another movie sitting out there, Rich, or two.
Sorry. But
we're bad at math. But he's got one or two other movies sitting out there that he looks like he's going to do this tax write-off to. And he can just fuck David Zaslav. That's a segment of the show. If he does something stupid next week, I'm going to bring it up again. I hope I don't have to, but he always does. Like every week, there's something dumb from David Zaslav. As a person, as somebody who's running one of the most prestigious and amazing studios in the history of film, he just ruins everything he touches, and he can fuck right off. I'm done.
This is the home of Humphrey Bogart. This is the home of gritty socialist, social dramas of the 30s and 40s, which ultimately gave rise to film noir. This is,
it's also the home of this, Rich.
That's ridiculous.
This movie right here, it is housed to this movie, which of course won the Best Picture in 1992. It is tonight's movie, Unforgiven, starring Clint Eastwood, Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman, Richard Harris, and just a really stellar cast. Let's get into it. So, production. So I find weird stories. I like to find the weirdest story. The weirdest story about production on this movie. First off, the weirdest story is the production actually started in 1980. He got the script in 1980, which is like ridiculous. And he took 12 years to make it because he just wasn't ready, is the rumors. My other favorite story of the production, Rich, is that when he went to cast English Bob, he called Richard Harris and offered him the part directly. Richard Harris, at that moment, and this apparently is a widely regarded weird story in Hollywood, Richard Harris was watching High Plains Drifter. And as he's watching High Plains Drifter, he gets a phone call from Clint Eastwood, or what he thinks is a prank. and just because he could not believe that as he's watching High Plains Drifter, a classic Clint Eastwood movie, he's being offered the role of English Bob. And
one would have a little trouble wrapping their head around with
like Clint Eastwood. You're not just some guy named Clint Eastwood. You're the Clint Eastwood. And I think the production's pretty. That's one of the only weird stories, right? That's one of the stories where everything about this movie, the script, was pretty much set pretty early.
I do want to kind of. I have a couple drafts of the script that I had not, unfortunately, had the chance to kind of dig into to look for too many differences. However, on the cover sheets, though, on the title pages, I do see two differences. One is David Webb Peebles, the screenwriter's initial draft was actually called The Cut Whore Killings, which kind of a little on the nose about what the movie's about. By the time it was ready,
did you really want to go with on the nose?
Okay, sorry, bad choice of words there.
Bad choice of words. Just bad choice of words.
By the time it was ready to go into production, it was still under the title of The William Money Killings. And at some point, and I don't know where it happened, was like during pre-production to some point when it came out, they decided to change the title to Unforgiven, which I think
much better
is a much better title.
It would have been really hard, like with either one of those other movies, like really hard.
And also, just to kind of give a shout out to David Webb Peoples. This is the guy who wrote Lady Hawk. He wrote Blade Runner. He wrote the first drafts of Blade Runner. He's
with Hampton Fancher. Don't forget Hampton Fancher, but yes.
And
he's also a good writer.
Yeah, he also wrote 12 Monkeys. So, and he really hasn't done. I mean, he's done a few things here and there since. I think he's mostly doing like punch-up work, things like that. But
he's become one of the highest paid script doctors.
Yeah,
he's the guy that comes in and fixes all your shit. Like he comes in and fixes, which is a shame because he
doesn't need to prove himself.
Yeah, the other weird things, like there's no weird in the production. There's no weird casting decision except for the weird, call to Richard Harris, and so the other thing is it was originally optioned to Francis Ford Coppola, which I can't even fathom after watching The Godfather last week and then watching The Godfather Part 2 this week, even though it's not part of our homework. I can't even fathom a Western like this directed by Francis Ford Coppola. It just, like, it makes, you've seen The Scream from Edward Munch, right? It just... It pushes my face together. I just don't know where it would go or how it would function. I think, the interesting thing here is their production comes, it comes to, Eastwood after a certain point in his life where he's made made a bunch of movies. They film in Alberta, Canada. Director of photography is Jack Green. Production designer is Henry Bumstead. Everything looks great. It looks beautiful. I want to give some shots that are actually in widescreen fashion so that we can get an idea of what this movie looks like when you're watching it proper.
I'm assuming I know what your first shot is going to be, right? The opening shot from the movie, yeah. Is absolutely stunning. And
it's stunningly beautiful and wonderfully shadowy, and just the idea.
I'd only ever watched this movie once before, earlier today, and that's when it came out. I'm not a big Westerns guy. It didn't really connect with me. I never kind of went back to it. I got a lot more out of digging into this movie this time around. But between 1992 and now, I had forgotten almost the entire film, with the exception of this opening and closing shot. And
yeah, because it is a perfect with regards to how it opens and how it closes is seminal. It also opens and closes with a brief kind of like chyron to the left of the screen that gives an idea of who Will Money is, who the lady that's getting buried at the beginning of the movie is, and where we're at. The movie, like this opening shot, takes place 2 years before the movie takes place, which I always found interesting in that they show the opening scene, he buries his wife, and then the next sequence is Big Whiskey in 1880, so it's 2 years later. You get other shots like this where it's just beautiful to look at.
In the two drafts I read, they start with a black screen and versions of the text that we see. We don't see that bookend, these bookend shots that we were looking at before. It just, pretty much drops us right into the bordello in Big Whiskey. But
which is interesting.
Yes, because these two shots, and I wonder if that's I
wonder if that's something Eastwood came up with.
Yeah.
Where Eastwood worked with the director of photography and said, I would like to get the best looking theoretical Western shot, which is essentially a house, a tree, somebody burying somebody. You know what I mean? Like all in shadow with the sun hitting it perfectly. And then, you also, this is another widescreen shot that I really, really like. Anything like the shots in the movie that are done in widescreen and CinemaScope, not CinemaScope, but what we call widescreen right now. Basically, I am in love with this aspect ratio, especially how if you pay attention to all points of this screen, it takes me back to my film classes at the University of Scranton, where we talked about democratic filmmaking and the idea that Citizen Kane is the first movie to have this. This movie has it in spades, where you have, if you look in this shot, you have the American flag in the upper corner. You have Little Bill. You have all the people at Greeley's that are all like the prostitutes and the guy who owns Greeley's, Slim. And then you have other people like dragging into the shot, and then the sky in the upper corner. You can look at all of them and you can get whatever you want out of them. And it is incredible, like just the composition shots, the shots in the rain, the shots in the bar at the end with everybody clustered together are really quite interesting from a photography standpoint with regards to cinematography, because usually Western bars are, it's interesting at the end, everybody's clustered together. So it's a really interesting scene because essentially you could all get hit. Everybody could get hit because everybody's like within 5 feet of each other. So let's see, we got a question or comments. So as I'm reading, I hear the test screening kind of went good and followed the graphic novel comic. I think you're talking about Batgirl. Test screenings didn't go well, but
check the next one because he expands that.
Okay. Test screening for actually follows graphic novel. Yes, the Crow test screening apparently went well. Stellan Skarsgård is going away from the Brandon Lee movie we've all come to respect and also cry about every time we watch it. Lady Hawk was great. Lady Hawk is one of the unsung 80s movies. Rich knows how to pick them, certainly. I think the interesting thing about production on this, again, it goes, one of the things that needs to be discussed is Eastwood, the way he handles production. He does everything very fast. So you get a lot of scenes and you get a lot of chances, like you don't get a lot of chances at the scenes, but every actor who comes out of a Clint Eastwood movie says he moves with economy. He moves with a vision that is unmatched. I don't know if it's now because he's certainly gotten older than this, but he also gives you a chance to build your character. And one of the things about this movie as an Eastwood direction is that this is one of the first Eastwood movies where everybody focused on the acting in the production. So whatever he did during the production, The acting is the best acting he's probably ever done. It's really good acting from Morgan Freeman, really great acting from Gene Hackman and Sal Rubinek and Richard Harris. It's a really well, like, the actors are clearly...
Sal Rubinek is one of those guys who just shows up and stuff.
And makes you're always better.
Like, oh, it's that guy! And it's not so much that, he has an interesting look to him. He has a nice face. That's great for movies. That's great for character work. It's every time he shows up, he brings his A+.
Something new. Yes, something new. He brings something new to the table. And this, we've certainly had a lot of characters that are hangers-on to gunmen and, people of the Old West. And, his writer / chronicler that, Little Bill steals from English Bob is one of the highlights of the movie. Like, even when he's trying to do things where he's listening to Little Bill stories and, like, he's complaining about whoever made the house is one of the great scenes in the movie. But
I want to get back to him when we start getting into more of our own.
Yes, the take on the movie. Yes,
there's something about his character and the kid that have some interesting parallels. I want to get to that.
That's fantastic. Okay, so let's move on. We've covered production. It was a very quick production, I should say. That's the other thing you always hear. It went from, well, the filming took place in various times between August and November. So actually, that is a quick production. That's 4 months, less than 4 months. Filmed in Alberta in August so that basically they could get it before it got really cold. The next thing we're going to chat about, let's go to our next tried and true thing that we look at, that we always like to talk about, box office. So when you're reading about this movie, Rich, and you don't deal with the same kind of concepts that we're dealing with every week, where we have a movie that gets released and then all of a sudden it's on streaming or it's premiering on Peacock or any of the number of Max or wherever. This film debuted at the top of the box office in its opening weekend, earning $15 million. It was in August. And in its opening weekend, it was the best ever opening for a Clint Eastwood film at the time.
And it was also... I was going to say, I'm sorry for interrupting. It should be noted, too, that August, still in the early 90s, was considered the dumping ground.
Dumping ground for the summer, yes. This movie and the movie that I will talk about in a moment are the two movies that changed that and made the opening weekend of August important. So this movie opens in the opening weekend of August. It opens on 2,071 theaters. It is the highest August opening weekend, holding that record until it was surpassed a year later when Warner Brothers smartly decided to release The Fugitive in the same slot. Who knew? And so, like, that's the other thing that's always interesting about box office and how things are changing. These slots, they come up and a studio finds a slot and a studio uses that slot over and over. You've seen it with Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is one of the key companies to do it. Warner Brothers slotted all of Nolan's films in late July, right? Like, they picked out a weekend. This was the weekend that we're going to open it because it's the same weekend that open, whatever. And they do it here. They do it, Unforgiven open.
I was going to say, Marvel had a stake driven, a flag planted in the first
May
weekend
3rd. May 3rd. Free comic book weekend. Free comic book weekend, Rich.
And then, it's for 15 years. This is the first year coming up that there's not a Marvel movie opening in May. It's insane.
May. We don't get one until July, and it's only one this year. So everybody get ready for $1 billion because it's going to happen. Anyway, and all the talk of Marvel being dead will be gone for one shining weekend. Anyway, as it grosses $500 million or whatever the hell it's going to gross. Anyway, the interesting thing here is, as you read about this opening, so first off, budget on the movie, Rich, budget is nothing. Budget is $14 $8.4 million.
Mm.
The movie ends up grossing 11 times its production budget. So it ends up grossing 101 domestic and 58 million international for a total of $159 million on a $14 million budget. Its adjusted domestic box office is $256 million, Rich. So
and
it's,
you know how long it was in theaters?
It was in theaters for a year, Rich. Like
49 weeks. Yeah.
It was literally in theaters for a year, and it didn't premiere on video or home theaters until September or October of the year it left. Mm-hmm. So this movie, the legs on this movie are
legs to walk and to continue to
rocketish. These legs are. Yeah. These legs are like the Rockettes. And you want the most amazing part of the 49 weeks? At some point, it hit, in its 35th week, it was number one at the box office. After it won the Oscars, it went to number one again. So talk about the opposite of Warner Brothers now, right? Where you're looking at the short window. This movie went for a year in theaters, made it all the way to the Academy Awards in March or April of that year, and then waited another 5 months to go to video. And you wonder why studios are struggling, Rich. Maybe if we had a window in place, theaters wouldn't be dying, Rich, or waiting desperately for Dune 2 to open.
You're talking to the choir here, man. You're preaching to the choir.
No, you and I have always talked about this, and you know that as somebody, I was okay. So in my position at Endless Mountains Theater when I worked for Dave Castelli, I went to a few NATO meetings, not NATO in Europe. I don't want to get anybody confused. NATO, I was going to say North American theater owners. The North American theater owners. I went to several meetings where you couldn't get big movie theater chains and little mom and pop theaters like I worked at to get on the same page to call studios out and say, hey, we need a window. We need a window so that people make an effort to go to the movies. And now we are in 2024, Rich. It is gone, right? We have weird little things in play like Universal or whatever, and movies that go quickly. But this whole concept of a theatrical window and how important theatrical, we're about to remember how important theatrical is, especially with a movie like Dune 2 coming out this week. How important it is to see it on the biggest screen possible, the loudest speakers possible. That your home theater is great, but it cannot come close to seeing it on a big screen. And this is one of the movies that lasted for a year in theater, almost a year in theaters. It's an astounding. When you look at it, Rich, it's insane. The opening weekend was $15 million, only 14.8% of its total gross. Rich, the idea that we have movies opening every week and every week the movies drop like a stone from one week to the other, 60, 70, 50, 60, 70%. And the idea that this movie's opening weekend box office was only 14% of its total box office.
Where usually we've been looking now at like the opening weekend box office being anywhere between 2 and 3 times. So 30 to 40% of its overall take, because they've collapsed those windows, and they expect,
because they've collapsed the windows, and because they've put it on as many screens as possible, so things die out faster than they ever have before. But the box office is astounding, and then it goes on. By the way, the box office is just one story. It goes on when it hits home video. It becomes one of the more profitable films in the history of Warner Brothers. And then they released several versions of it. You know, it starts off in DVD and VHS, and then it goes into Blu-ray. And there have been several incarnations of it. Of course, it just in 2017 got a 4K UHD Blu-ray update. So it is the gift that keeps on giving on a $14 million budget. Just making money hand over fist.
It's a perpetual moneymaker for Warner's all these decades.
Yeah. 22 years later, we're still talking about the movie. Let's see. Joe writes, my father basically grew up watching Clint Eastwood from TV to movies. I worked in a movie theater when this came out and got my parents in for free. First film my dad almost walked out on. Granted, he's not a film aficionado, just an Eastwood fan. Okay, we're gonna get to that now. Now we're gonna get serious, as Rich and I, and I'm gonna agree with your dad. This is gonna be, it's a beautiful movie. I think it's well done. Critical response now. I'm gonna say this right now. For all the talk of Revisionist, and for all the talk of how important it is and how different it is and how the themes and, the idea of revenge, the idea of people changing over time and not being able to outrun your past, that sort of thing. To me, and you may disagree with me, the movie really sizzles when it's doing classic Western tropes. The classic Western tropes of the movie for me sizzle. Eastwood walking into the bar at the end of the movie, just by himself.
You almost want an Ennio Morricone score for that moment.
Yes. And I think the funny thing about this, as this movie has kind of gone through history, it is called Revisionist because of everything that happens beforehand. But I'm so amazed at the idea, to me, that the best parts of the movie are the Western tropes. Like the best parts of the movie for me are the Western tropes. I can't explain that. I can only explain that, as somebody who grew up on John Ford Westerns, right? Who is, the idea that you could look at something like The Searchers as a revisionist Western, right? Because it's John Wayne. He's playing a totally terrible person. He's one of the worst people ever. And for long periods of that movie, he's going to kill his niece, right? He's going to murder her because she's been touched by an Indian, right?
Yeah.
And I just think that this movie gets a lot of credit for being revisionist, and the scenes that really cook for me, and I was waiting to watch it today and see if I still felt this way. The scenes that cook for me are the scenes that are Clint Eastwood being fucking Clint Eastwood. Is that a terrible thing to say? I feel bad about I was thinking about it as I'm watching. I'm like, everything's great. Like the setup, the build, the shots, it's beautiful. It's well done. It kind of plods along. It's 2 hours and 10 minutes. It won best editing. I don't know how it did that. I looked at it and just went, it's all cut together. It works well, but the scenes that cook for me are the pieces that most people look at and go, it's revisionist, it's different. And I look at it and I go, that sequence at the end, Rich, it's fucking High Plains Drifter. It's fucking Outlaw Josie Wales. It's everything he's come to represent in his filmography. And for whatever reason, it was sold as a revisionist Western because of how it tackled other themes and other things. Mm-hmm. But the scenes that really cook are getting revenge for Ned. Are the idea that who owns this shithole? And he shoots him, and then the line where you just shot an innocent man, you're a coward, and well, he should have thought about that before he decorated his establishment with my best friend. Mm-hmm. I think it's a weird dynamic that the movie gets so much props for being revisionist, and to me, the only thing I can see at the end is that it goes back to the well. Anybody who doesn't want to die, get out the back.
in that moment, and I distinctly remember thinking this, where, he's like, well, he should have, had a gun,
He should have got one. Yeah, he should have got one.
I found myself thinking about a kind of like almost like a mirror image scene in Shane, where, Jack Palance forces a guy to pick up a gun so he can shoot him, and they go, "You all saw him; he had a gun." So I saw that as kind of like a weird mirror to that, in the fact that to some people, it doesn't fucking matter if the other person is armed or not armed. They're gonna find an excuse to just shoot them.
Yes, and I think, but for me, like, as you said earlier, I grew up on a steady diet with a name like John Wayne. I cannot not grow up on a steady diet of Westerns. And what I think, for all the talk, when people look at this movie and go,
only liking like pre-code romantic comedies, your dad would have been very devastated.
Yeah, bringing up Baby. Anyway, but for me, like, and I think it's one of those things. I think when my dad saw it, I think when I watched it with him, he said the exact same thing. He's like, I don't understand this revisionist talk, because in a sense it works. The scenes that really cook, right, are the scenes where it's like, I'll give you another scene that I think really works. There's a sequence where Will is sick. Will Money is sick. He's been beaten up. They take him, and they're nursing him back to health. And both Morgan Freeman and the kid are bawling their eyes out. They are bawling every prostitute they can. They're taking money off the bounty, right? And he has this scene where he wakes up and he's like, "Where's everybody?" And the girl that's been cut is there with him, and he has a really sweet scene with her where he's just like, "I don't not want to go for a roll in the hay with you, but my wife passed away, so I'm just not ready for it." That's out of other Westerns, right? The prostitute with the heart of gold, who offers the really good, the guy that has the moral compass, or the guy that's changed. I don't understand, Rich, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm totally wrong about this. I don't understand how it gets this revisionist crown, like it changed something, when in reality, the parts that cook are like the parts that are like that sequence with the prostitute is adorable. He's like, it's not that I don't want to get a free one from you. In fact, we're both scarred. I like it. You know what I mean? Like,
I would say it's a case of we learn a lot about Clint Eastwood's character here, as opposed to most other Westerns with him, where he's just the silent.
He's the man with no name. He's the man with no name.
We know his name. We know a lot of the atrocities he's committed. We know why he changed. He sobered up because of the love of a good woman.
A good woman made him better.
Yeah, and I think the real
also his life is terrible. Like his life, he has 2 kids, a dead wife, and he falls every 3 seconds in a pig thing. So it's like the chance he gets to go, he's like, I gotta go for the money.
Yeah, because he wants something better for
his kids. Yes,
he's trying to be a better person, and he realizes he can't without having to relapse a bit. I think what's interesting, though, is there's a big mystery that's kind of set up at the beginning of the movie and remains unanswered at the end, which is, why did his wife fall in love with him to begin with? What did she see in him? And it's not so much, that she changed him, but, it's like, why did she try to change him? Why did she try to help him be a better person to begin with?
That's a weird question. It's a weird question.
We only see that, though, in reflections of what's going on now in his life.
How he's changed. How he's changed.
In that exchange with the cut prostitute, he talks about, my wife's back in Kansas. She's looking over, she's watching over the kids.
The prostitute doesn't know that she's passed.
He very much believes that she is in heaven watching out for the family. He even, he kind of like, he's in his mind, he's still married to her, and he's going to uphold that vow.
Can I also give you like another reason why I think the revisionist thing is kind of like, it's kind of weird for me where I just kind of sit back after seeing like so many great Westerns, like Wild Bunch and Magnificent Seven, and I want to get all of them out there. Searchers, Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Sons of Katie Elder, all these great movies. I think it's weird that, again, it's called a revisionist Western. It has all these things about, like, you know, killing a man is rough, and you know, revenge is a terrible thing, and, you know, I was changed by this great woman. Will Money kills everybody that is morally bankrupt in the town of Big Whiskey. He then goes, gets the money, gets his kids, and goes to San Francisco and has the best life ever as a seller of dry goods.
Mm-hmm.
How is it any different from any classic Western where the good guy walks away wealthier and more better off? The only thing that could make it more Western is if the prostitute went with him. That would be the only thing. And I think it's just a weird thing where this movie is taken on a life of its own as some sort of difference in Western filmmaking. And I don't see it, Rich.
I mean, obviously, Eastwood is drawing on a lot of tropes from spaghetti Westerns of
his past. That's one of the coolest things about the movie. One of the coolest things about the movie is Will Money could be any one of his characters. The man with no name could literally be Will Money.
But like, here's the thing. He makes a moral decision to go back to that old way of life. And instead of that being seen as a negative overall, like, and he dies at the end, even though he's, you know, meted out that
he gets shot in the back as he's walking out, like in The Shootist. Yes.
Yeah, something like that. Instead, him making that moral choice to go back to being a killer reaps him rewards. And that, I think, is
and
like
it's the right decision.
It's kind of an, you know, an application of the moral idea of most Westerns, I would say.
It is, but it's interesting. I think part of it is this kind of, again, I think it's a surface view of, and I'm not saying you, but there are a lot of people who don't see a lot of Westerns in their lives. And they come across this Western, and it's Clint Eastwood, and it's great. And then you watch some of the other old Clint Eastwood movies, and you just get, like, you get jazzed. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Can't not get jazzed. Yeah. And I think one of the things that's interesting is, I think one of the ways it's kind of viewed as revisionist is that the bad guys are actually what the sheriff is a bad guy. And I think that's such a surface level revisionist take on a Western, because we've seen a lot of bad sheriffs in Western movies. Do you know what I mean? Like, none as evil as Little Bill, none as evil as portrayed by Gene Hackman, right? But we've seen a lot of bad, like, so when I think it goes, well, it's the good guys are actually bad guys and the bad guys are actually good guys, and that's part of its revisionist credo, right? I'm sitting here and I was thinking about when my dad saw this, right? And my dad sat there and he said, you know, he came out of me, he's like, it's a great movie, but the idea that it's selling itself as this big Western revisionist thing when we've had other revisionists, like The Wild Bunch is a revisionist Western, right? The Searchers is a revisionist Western because it takes John Wayne, all of John Wayne's tropes, throws them out the window and kind of just, you know, but this movie gets all kinds of plaudits, all kinds of things on this idea. And I just sit there and I go, and that's what my dad, I remember my dad, I'm using cooks. What are the parts that cook? The parts that cook are the classics. Clint Eastwood riding into town with Ned's shotgun, looking at Ned's body, walking in and just having the shotgun, that shot where the shotgun is over the entire crowd as Little Bill is rallying the posse. That's never going to be. Mm-hmm. It's straight out of Clint Eastwood classic Westerns. And and while Will Money could be any one of his characters or any one of those things, I just think it's interesting that this movie that gets it changed westerns and it did all these things.
Well,
the parts that cook are the westerns parts. The western
let me
parts.
get two characters though I think who kind of undermine or maybe kind of poke a hole into the balloon of westerns. And that's kind of what I alluded to earlier. The characters of the writer Beauchamp, played by Saul Rubinek, and the character
W.W. Beauchamp,
played by James Woolvate. Now,
the Schofield Kid.
In Beauchamp, the writer, we have a guy who basically was making his career repeating these stories and putting down into publication stories that he was hearing from English Bob, who was obviously grandizing himself ridiculously. And then as they filter through Beauchamp, he is also puffing them up a little bit, as he says in one point, I'm adding a poetry to the language. I'm adding a poetry to the story.
Yes.
So they're the guys who are telling the story. The Western, this one guy is, blowing smoke up his own ass, and the other guy is putting that out into the world. And those stories circle around to the Schofield Kid, who thinks he can go out and live this grand
and
life.
Become that. Right. He thinks he can become one of them.
Reality of the situation, which it obviously is not. And he discovers that fairly quickly, when, right at that moment of having to shoot the one cowboy in the outhouse, he has that moment.
I can't do this. Yes. And I think you've hit upon something.
And also we have Beauchamp. Once they roll into town and English Bob gets the shit kicked out of him,
he hangs on to somebody else. He moves right on.
But he sees the reality of life out west, of the lawlessness, of the cheapness of human life, and it scares the crap out of him, basically.
Enough that he pisses his pants. He pisses his pants and he won't shoot. He pisses his pants and he won't shoot. I think what you're onto something, and here's what I would say to you. And this is where I'm going to add on to your thing, because I think you're right. I think the three most revisionist pieces of the movie are Ned, the Schofield Kid, and Beauchamp. Those are the three where they're the most revisionist pieces, and Beauchamp is the only one that's part of the end. Well, Ned's part of the end, but Beauchamp is the only one that's alive at the end, aside from the kid. We don't know what happens to the kid, but Beauchamp is the only one alive to tell the tale, and he's going to blow it out of proportions. It's going to make, like, you shot 5 men. Tell me how you did it. Why'd you pick this one? How'd it go this way? Blah, blah, blah. I got lucky. Also, Clint Eastwood cheats. He throws the gun. It's not a proud moment. But those are the three characters that give it a revisionist feel, because the kid kills somebody, and instead of getting the charge out of killing somebody, he's drinking and's like, I got to give this up. You can take my gun. I'm good. Right? Those are the three. And part of my take that I'm going to stick with, and even when I'm against the wall on this one, because I think I'm against the wall on this one, I'm going to stick with it, because I don't think those characters are representative of the ending. Beauchamp's there, and he's going to tell the tale, but it is going to be a tall tale, right? It is going to be bigger than life.
He's going to blow it out of proportion, because that's what's
the kid's not there, and Ned's not there. Ned is the guy that can shoot somebody from a mile away, but then can't, right? Yeah. So they're the revisionist pieces where I thought I could do something, but I can't. I wanted to do something, but I can't. And I want to write about something, but I can't tell the truth. I need to make it grandiose, right? So those are the three pieces. But Rich, are they represented in the end? Are they represented in the ending where Will Money walks into a fucking bar, murders 5 deputies, and kills an evil man, right? Little Bill is one of the most evil, vile characters you will ever see in film history. He's a bad person. Get me the bullwhip. Don't get me the bullwhip. They're going to pay with ponies. You're not even going to whip him? He's a bad person. He's into commerce. He loves his house. I built a house. I don't deserve this. Okay. And I just think it's interesting. It's a great movie. It's well done. The idea that it puts a bell point circle on Clint Eastwood's career, and it ends up being the last Western he ever did. Although some could argue that Gran Turismo is a Western. I'm just throwing it out there. It isn't. It takes place in a town, but
yeah,
but the idea that
30 years later we're still talking about it.
Yes, it's an important film, but I don't know that it's like I tended to watching it as a Western, and whether or not it falls in line with the great Westerns I was raised on. And I think it does. But I can also see Joe's dad's
first and foremost, and
the
Western.
The Western trappings are just kind of there. Yeah. But I can understand, my personal not disappointment, my personal you do realize that the best parts of the movie are the Western tropes, like Will Money telling the stories, or like the prostitute with the heart of gold, or they're the best parts of the movie, right? Mm-hmm. And I can also, when we had a comment from Joe where he's like, my dad walked out, my dad was disappointed. I can understand that. If you grew up watching Clint Eastwood Westerns and he makes this movie where it's, if Joe's dad doesn't get to the end where Will Money gets to do what Will Money is supposed to do because Ned's been butchered.
I think the Will Money character basically is a questioning look at a lot of the things that Eastwood has played in the past.
Yes. Any one of his characters.
That vicarious thrill of him shooting up the bad guys and everything else, or whoever he's up against. But suddenly we're like, this is kind of like, life was cheap in those movies.
Yes. Did the man with no name see some of the people he killed in his dreams? Did he think about those people ever again? Like when he pulled the steel iron shirt trick, when he killed that guy, did he make him feel better? I think it's a real interesting thing. I think it's a real interesting take. Let's see. We got other comments. Sorry I'm late, guys. Well, you had places to be, Natasha, and you're just not with us tonight. Also, congratulations on being casted as Lust. I'm sure everybody will be super happy when that show hits. It's better than losing your truck, house, and dog, and the wife stays. It's a joke. Okay. And then Urban Cowboy Western, maybe. But yes, I think you're talking about Gran Turismo. Yes. And then thank you. I was talking about it Western, I don't mean to disregard. I think it's an important Western. I think it's a well-done movie. It's a Best Picture winner. There are not a lot of Westerns that have won Best Picture, so it's in a rarefied air. But if I understand Joe's dad going, I don't want to feel questionable about Will Money going into a saloon after his friends put on display outside. You know what I mean? I can understand that. Let's talk about another important aspect of this: legacy and franchise availability. Now, interesting here. This is theoretically based on, there is a franchise, there is a legacy in the sense that Ken Watanabe made an Unforgiven about a samurai. So this movie does have a, in spirit anyway, sequel, right? That basically, was made and was very well received. The legacy, though, of this movie is not necessarily sequels or anything. It is the legacy that it is Clint Eastwood's last directed Western. It's his last starring Western. It's probably his best starring role. There's a vibe to the role where he's really acting and it's really well done, and he has really great moments. The prostitute scene is phenomenal. It's not that I don't want a free one from you. We're both scarred. I'm broken too. It's just I can't do it. But you're beautiful. We're both scarred. We're both not looking great, and I'm okay with that. But if I was to take a free one, it would be from you, right? We also need to talk about the legacy that that has to be talked about. It is an Academy Award winner. It is a film that has been protected by the Library of Congress, which is an important thing for any movie to reach that threshold, where we get into the rarefied air where it's guarded, right? It's a movie that's guarded by, it's a movie that's important in the history of film. So much so that the Library of Congress keeps a record of it. Academy Award night, I was talking about this. It was Academy Awards 1993.
1992.
92?
For the year.
No, it's 90. Yeah, 93 was when it happened. 65th annual.
This is the last Western to win an Academy Award, unless you count No Country for Old Men as a Western. Which you could see the argument, but
you can, yeah. I mean, I once wrote a paper where you could call Blade Runner a Western. Like you can argue anything is a Western for long periods of time. But so this movie wins. It goes into the Academy Awards. It wins. It's nominated for. Let me see. Hold on. Go back to my page. It's nominated for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Academy Awards. It wins 3. It wins Best Film Editing, Joel Cox. It wins Best Supporting Actor, Gene Hackman. And it wins Best Picture and Best Director. It wins 4. I'm sorry. It wins 4 out of 9. Best Picture, Best Director for Clint Eastwood. So but he doesn't win Best Actor. He's nominated for 3. Doesn't win all 3. Gene Hackman wins Best Supporting Actor. Do you know who was nominated that year in Best Supporting Actor, Rich? I had to look at. I will tell you. Best Picture that year. Best Picture nominees: Unforgiven, A Few Good Men, The Crying Game, Howard's End, and Scent of a Woman. Yeah, it's a pretty. There's at least one there that I go, maybe a mistake. Best Supporting Actor, Rich. Gene Hackman beats Jay Davidson in the Crying Game, playing Dill. He beats Al Pacino, who's nominated twice that night, in Glengarry Glen Ross as Ricky Roma. He also, of course, Best Actor goes to Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman, in his least deserved Academy Award win ever. And he's also nominated against David Paymer in Mr. Saturday Night as Stan Young. And Gene Hackman beat this little up-and-comer named Jack Nicholson, who played Colonel Nathan Jessup in A Few Good Men. And
let me ask you this. Do you consider Dances with Wolves a Western?
Yeah, it has to be considered a Western.
So just kind of looking over like all the Best Picture winners, there have been only 3 films that would qualify as Westerns then.
Cimarron.
1931 Cimarron, Dances with the Wolves in 1990. So you had a 59-year gap there, 2-year gap, and now we're at 32 years without another Western.
The interesting thing about the whole Western thing is, so in looking at it, right, the 2 that won, Unforgiven and Dance of Wolves, right? There could be an argument, a big argument, that Goodfellas should have beat Dance of the Wolves. And I was looking at the nominees today, there is for me, of the nominees, A Few Good Men, to me, stands the test of time, right? It is a movie we still talk about. It is one of the rare movies that when it is on, Rich, I will stop what I'm doing, because I know I'm going to get to the point. First off, there's all kinds of great performances in that movie. And then that movie is just incredibly well made, even though it's very formulaic, right? Yes. I think that the sexy pick in 92 would have been The Crying Game, because it's a fantastic movie. with a secret
It had a hook.
It had a hook.
You know,
but it's also a really interesting movie about the IRA. It's A Scent of Woman is kind of like not a deserving Best Picture nominee. Like, in my opinion, not a deserving Best Picture nominee. When the same year you had so many other things sitting on the end. You had The Player, didn't get nominated for Best Picture. You had Chaplin didn't get nominated for Best Picture. You had Dracula, didn't get nominated for Best Picture. Malcolm X didn't get nominated for Best Picture.
It was a hell of a year in '93.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the legacy here is it's one of the Western Best Picture winners, but it's not necessarily. I think you could go through 100 Westerns before a Western fan gets to Unforgiven and goes, "That's my favorite." Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that's a real interesting thing. Like, no matter how revisionist or great it is, if somebody's watching it and they love the genre, they love Westerns, like, which I do, I clearly do. Just because I was raised that way. That's how I was raised. It was like a gene that was ignited, like, via the X-Men. You know what I mean? Like, I was born to, fall in love with Westerns. I just think it's one of those movies that I don't know. Like, Dances with Wolves is the same way for me. I look at Dances with Wolves as an incredible achievement, but should it have won Best Picture? Should it have, it beat Goodfellas?
Yeah.
Yeesh. You know what I mean? Like, and this one, as I was looking at the Best Picture nominees tonight, Rich, I was thinking to myself, is it better than A Few Good Men or The Crying Game? I don't know. Like, I as good as it is, as amazing as it is, it was at a time when they were trying to celebrate, Eastwood as the director and how he had become, like, the great director, kind of like a little bit like Robert Redford, right? I just don't know that it's as good as The Crying Game or A Few Good Men. I don't know. It could be just that I feel this revisionist thing is bullshit. Like, I feel like in my heart of hearts, I understand, like, you can look at all the trauma and, he knows the names of the people he killed and all this other stuff. But the movie sizzles when it activates that trope. Mm-hmm. When it buys into that trope and wholeheartedly just, like, shooting Little Bill is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's a bad person. He's a bad person. Yep. He lets a woman get beat and doesn't do anything about it because the guy offers horses because she's property. He's a bad person. So, like, why do we embrace it as a revisionist Western when the best parts of it are the Western tropes that make classic Westerns classic?
I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. This is one of the movies, like, I'm going to tell you, for people watching the show, this is one of the hardest movies to not love, but it's also one of the easiest to kind of look at the swirling thing that's around this movie that protects it from everything. And when you look at something like, when you watch a Western like The Wild Bunch, that's truly revisionist because they're not good. They're not good people, but you're rooting for them. You know what I mean? Like, and it's a time when the West is ending and they don't know their place and they try to figure out their place and they eventually end up together. You know what I mean? Like, they eventually end up working together and dying together. And so if you ask me, is The Wild Bunch better than Unforgiven? I would say The Wild Bunch is better. If you ask me how the fact that while The Unforgiven has a Best Picture Oscar, but Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid doesn't.
Okay.
With one of the greatest screenplays in the history of time by William Goldman. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, with two of the best star-making performances of all time that also ends tragically, that ends awful if you're fans of these two guys that you've been watching for 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like, is that not revisionist? Is the Wild Bunch not revisionist? Is the Searchers not revisionist for turning 30 years of John Wayne movies on its head by making him the most, like, just awful, like a guy who covets his.
Like I said before, though, I think, you know, the way this character questions, you know, the previous iconic, you know, stance of.
Well, I think that's one of its allures. One of its allures is if, like, say John Wayne's alive, right? And John Wayne makes this movie, right? Where you look back at all the John Wayne characters, right? I think that's part of the allure of the movie is that Eastwood comes into it with all of these movies. He comes into it with The Outlaw Josie Wales, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. You know, he comes into it with all of these movies as kind of a pin of, like, do you remember what I did in this particular genre? Do you remember how amazing I was in this particular genre? And now I'm going to try to turn it on its head and make you feel differently about everything you've seen before. And I think it's an interesting take, but I also think that I think it's something that's become a trend, like a trendy thing, to say it's this revisionist Western that changed everything, when in reality, most of the stuff that works is good Westerns. Like if you have like something like, you know, we're about to get Horizon, right? We're about to get the Horizon saga, the Kevin Costner thing. The best part of that trailer is Kevin Costner shooting a bunch of people. Westerns work.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And that's, you know, I think that's the most interesting thing is, for all of its revisionist talk, it hasn't, for a legacy purpose, changed anything. We're still trying.
The genre were dead in the 90s, you know, and is kind of dead now.
I would argue that the genre's on its way back a little bit. I would argue that Tyler Sheridan in Yellowstone, Tyler Sheridan, and let me give you another revisionist Western that I think is a better Western, maybe for me. I love Hell or High Water. Anybody watching the show or listening to the show, if you haven't seen Hell or High Water, you should fucking see it, because it's phenomenal. It's a fantastic fucking movie. That's as revisionist. That's as.
Firefly, but you know.
Well, Firefly too. Like the idea that we have these revisionist things, but like this is revisionist. One of the things that it pins its heart to is it's revisionist because Clint Eastwood made a bunch of really great, memorable Westerns, and then he makes a character that's, you know, thinking about his past and has found a way out of the bottle and found a great woman, and then he goes back into it. And for me, the interesting thing for me is rewatching it today was the best parts of the movie are the Western parts, the parts where he does what he's supposed to do.
Okay, then that's fun.
And that's that's our last thing. You know, but this is one of the, I will tell you, for me today, this was one of the more interesting things, because I went into this knowing how, and Joe kind of hit on it. Our dads went into this movie were like, okay, right? Like, is he poo-pooing all of the stuff he made before in an effort to kind of like change things? And I think that's hard. That was hard for my dad and hard for Joe's dad, right? I think that's I think that's where part of the allure of the revisionist thing comes from, the fact that he was able to flip on his head his iconic, you know, his filmography. And I think it's an interesting, like, very few actors could have done this Western and flipped it on its head. You know, very few could have done it. Yeah. And it's a good movie. It's, like I said, I don't know that there's anything better than Clint Eastwood shooting Gene Hackman. Like, but the thing is, I'm told not to enjoy any of that early in the movie. So it's this weird, like, I shouldn't enjoy it, but, you know, he did all that bad things to Ned. He beat him to death.
Maybe that's all done for you to question why you find enjoyment in the idea that life is cheap in these movies.
Maybe there you go. Maybe that's why it's revisionist.
But again,
That's a perfect place to end the night. Rich, where can people find your stuff?
Okay.
We've been letting them know where to find our stuff on YouTube and Facebook, all episode.
All of my writing can be found at filmbuffonline.com. I do 2 other podcasts besides this little show. The first is the Big Picture Podcast, which I do with my best friend and amazing co-host, Natasha Bogutsky. We have a
frequent guest and troublemaker here as well.
We have a new episode dropping tomorrow. I think I'm going to have it drop at noon. I just haven't decided when it's going to go live yet. And in that episode, we take a look at the recently completed first season of Disney Plus's Percy Jackson and the Olympians. And we talk about that, how it compares to the 2 previous Percy Jackson films. And we kind of dig into it.
They were very bad movies.
The second podcast that I am on is, as I mentioned before at the top of the show, Philadelphia Film Critics Circle's Film Scribes podcast. We have a new episode coming up some point this week. I'm not sure when that's
Is there something opening that you would have this amazing podcast on for?
We do a little bit of talk about Madam Web, but we spend most of the hour talking about Dune Part 2. You can find Film Buff Online on Facebook just by searching Film Buff Online. Like and follow us there, and you'll get links to all our material as it goes live, as well as other bits of like film history, things like that. You can find links to Big Picture Podcast at bigpicturepod.com, and on social networks, Twitter and Blue Sky, I am at FilmBuffRich.
Okay, you can find me, JW the Movie Guy, on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, X, whatever the hell they're calling it these days, Instagram, JW the Movie Guy on all these things, and Blue Sky as well. I was able to get on Blue Sky, so I have it on almost everything. You can also catch me here every Monday night with my good friend Rich Drees. You will be able to catch me this Friday before you head out to the theaters. We're gonna be doing a Dune review. Everything you need to know about this movie coming out. And you also can catch me tomorrow night on Loud Nerdy with my good friends Jerry and Kyle. We may have a new segment tomorrow night. It just kind of hit. So right now we're already doing a segment where we're going through all the Twilight Zones. We're 7 episodes in. Phenomenal writing. The writing's off the charts. Like Rod Serling was a genius ahead of its time. But we might have a new segment tomorrow night, so something to look forward to in Loud Nerdy. And then I will also say something to look forward to next week as we finish up our Oscar Decade Cavalcade and take a couple weeks off so that Rich and I can enjoy the Oscars, the 96th annual Oscars. But we will be ending our Oscar Decade Cavalcade with a recent winner that is much better than it actually gets credit for. Like I think it's much better than anything we've seen recently, but it's also really genius. It's a little movie called Spotlight, which of course deals with the Boston Globe's handling of the Catholic priest scandal. Mark Ruffalo, Michael Keaton, Rachel McAdams, Liev Schreiber, John Slattery, Stanley Tucci. It is an incredible piece of work that I don't think that has kind of gotten lost in the shuffle with some of the excitement of recent Best Picture winners. And I can't wait to discuss it. We will do that next week.
I can't wait to revisit it.
I've rewatched it at least twice in the last year. I know I have. I can't wait to watch it again. But Monday, March 4th at 10 p.m. And you can see all the different places we got down there. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Twitter, IMDb, all of those places. But we'll be here next Monday night. Thank you for joining us tonight for Unforgiven. We'll see everybody next week. Rich, I'll save a Dune popcorn for you somewhere. And I'll see you Friday. We'll be live Friday to do a Dune review. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great night. Go